Good morning and welcome to episode 8 of the Cloud Education webinar series brought to you by Matrix Integrated Solutions. Today's episode is called What Are Your Options for Working Remotely? Thanks for joining us. Before we get started, just a quick note, this session is being recorded. So we'll make sure to send that out by email as soon as we're done here. And today we'll be talking about uncertain times and how they've changed the paradigm of work. You guys saw in the invitation, how does technology support your ability to work remotely? Well, that depends on your IT infrastructure. So we know there's remote options out there. We just don't know if everybody's using them. So we want to take a moment today to welcome in Jeremy Russell. Hey, Jeremy, how's it going?
Good morning.
Morning. Thanks for joining us. Jeremy is an ERP consultant. Jeremy works with Sage 100, Sage 100 Cloud, and also with our cloud hosted product Acumatica, which we'll be talking a little bit about here in a moment. But Jeremy, just to kind of get us started, I thought maybe we'd go over what our agenda is for today. Some pretty basic stuff. Whoops. About that. I thought I had it all figured out, folks. I don't.
Under control here.
We're going to talk about using Sage 100 and Sage 100 Cloud remotely. And then, of course, our true cloud solution, Acumatica. And what we're really talking about here is basically the first being Sage 100, Sage 100 Cloud. We recognize as an on-premise solution. And we're going to talk to you about possibly hosting that and showing you how through the use of a hosting provider, you can access Sage 100 or Sage 100 Cloud to work remotely in today's environment. Acumatica is a solution that's built for the cloud. It was built in the cloud. There's a lot of specifics behind that, so I won't spoil that for you, Jeremy. Appreciate that you'll give us some guidance on that here in a moment. And then lastly, we'll wrap things up with talking about some solutions that work to enable you to use your system remotely. And that'll make sense here in just the coming moments. So to get us started, Jeremy, I thought we'd talk about the different ways that you can work remotely with Sage 100 Cloud. Kind of set it up there earlier. We know it's on-premise solution. It's not necessarily true cloud, so perhaps hybrid would be the right, subject for it. But can you tell us the different ways technically that you can work remotely with Sage 100 Cloud right now?
Yeah, what it really comes down to with a product like Sage 100 and Sage 100 Cloud is RDP. So when you when you think about the way to access an on-premise solution or a desktop-based solution like Sage 100, you need to get to the application so it can run remotely. That's kind of the topic of today. But RDP stands for Remote Desktop Protocol, and there's a couple different ways to do that. One would be to run it, just to open up your PC to be able to be remote controlled through RDP. That means you would leave your PC on, have the ability to get through your firewall and open it up and basically take over or remote control your PC from a different PC. That's kind of the cheapest way to do things without a lot of
makes
effort.
Sense. Yeah.
Probably the biggest hurdle that you have when you think about doing that is you need two PCs. So that
good point.
The second thing that you have to really think about is the ability for you to get through that firewall. That might take some IT effort, because as we see the world as we see it today with all the security problems and hackers coming in, you're going to want to be uberly careful about opening yourself up. So another way to do RDP is to put it on a server and let the RDP server serve up desktops or remote solutions so that you can access Sage 100 or whatever else on your server that you want. That limits the need to have multiple PCs. Now you're kind of getting to a server and using what they call a CAL, a license to open up another desktop but you're managing it on the server, and the server can manage many people at the same time. Again, still giving you that remote desktop app or remote RDP, remote desktop protocol, without having to use kind of take over a PC that's sitting, dormant.
That's
One
helpful.
other application that's there, similar to RDP, then I'll come back to you, Nate, is remote app. And remote app is very similar to RDP from a standpoint of the traditional sense of RDP says, I'm going to open up a desktop and remote control a desktop session. So you get all the flavor like you're working at that PC, but it's just a kind of a virtual machine in the cloud or in that server. Another application is remote app, which is publishing an application like a Sage 100 in remote app allows you to access the application remotely, but doesn't give you access to the whole desktop. So
Pieces.
Gives you access only to Sage 100. So did you have another question around that, Nate?
No, that's excellent. No, I appreciate it.
So the third thought around the whole RDP structure and thought process is to host your solution. The hosting means you're going to put it somewhere, not in your four walls and not on a physical device that you maintain. You're going to basically offload that to someone else that's going to maintain that physical device. That's where Summit Hosting comes into place. Go to My ERP comes into place. Amazon Web Services as a hosting solution. Google Platform. The question is, how much do you want to maintain it versus how much do you want someone else to maintain it? Whereas Summit Hosting will maintain the server, maintain the architecture. Go to My ERP is another solution. What they do is they configure AWS to be your farm, your hosted platform, but they're doing all the management of that platform, so you don't have to think about it, and it's off your plate. But again, it's a new version or a different flavor of a way to RDP in. When you talk about a hosted solution, or I'm sorry, an on-premise solution like Sage 100, RDP, different flavors really is the answer when it comes to
the whole thing.
How much you want to do it or how much you want someone else to make that platform available for you to handle.
Yeah, I got a quick question for you, Jeremy. When you say host the solution and they're going to take care of everything, so that would include like backups. I know that's a big thing. You want to make sure, folks, if you haven't lately, make sure you're backing up your Sage 100 instance, and then also make sure that the backup is working. So once you back it up, put it in and make sure that actually restores. But yeah, does that mean that they take care of all that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Nate. There's different hosting solutions that have different levels of that. Let's go away from the word backup, because I think backups are kind of a norm. But when you really want to define it, you want to say disaster recovery plan and redundancy.
Right.
So you want to put it in a category of disaster recovery to say, if something happens, how quickly can we get back up, and what's the SLA or the service level agreement to hit that mark and to be there. We know that between a couple of different hosting solutions, I'll leave them nameless. One makes backups, and those backups are done every night, and there's a good image of that backup, but the backup is on premise inside of their data center. So when you think about the level of that backup, I wouldn't put that at the level of disaster recovery, because the backup is on site. So if the site gets taken out,
physically, something happens to the site.
Yeah, you're not the greatest scenario. The likelihood is low, but part of it is that solution comes in at a cheaper price than maybe some others. But some others say, we're going to back up every night, on site and off site. And we're going to not only back up the database, we're going to back up the entire image of the server, and we're going to make sure that is up within 5 minutes of something going down. in a different region of the world, or in the US, a different data center, because they've got the redundancy in place. When you work with someone that is on a platform like AWS or Google platform or Azure with Microsoft, a lot of that is kind of built into their contracting. Just by being a part of their platform, they're assuring that it's going to be that disaster recovery in place.
Uptime and disaster recovery, and that makes sense. Like you said, it depends on what price point and what level of disaster recovery you're looking for. But I could see where hosting the solution kind of takes all of that technical knowledge or requirements and puts it on the provider. So, I mean, regardless, Matrix can help you further understand what your options are for working with Sage 100 Cloud remotely. Again, we mentioned it's an on-premise solution, but that doesn't mean that you can't access it from home. Jeremy, how are you set up today?
Yeah, as Nate points out, I'm a remote employee for Matrix. I'm in Idaho, Boise, Idaho. Been working remote from home since I joined Matrix, and I've been a remote employee for a long time. And I'm using a lot of different solutions, including RDP, Office 365, all the solutions that make it possible for me to work from anywhere in the world almost. It really doesn't matter as long as I have an internet connection.
Yeah, and obviously when the coronavirus was keeping everybody at home, we had the ability to take our machines with us and still continue conducting business. So that's the obvious benefit from it. But there's some technical stuff in there that, again, Jeremy or I reach out to either one of us, we'd be happy to walk you through it and connect you with some of those hosting providers if that sounds like something in the near future you're considering. As we all know, Sage 100 Cloud, we say a couple times already, is on-premise solution, but we're finding a way for you to use it remotely. There's another way to use software, ERP software remotely, and that is a solution that we've recently picked up called Acumatica. And I thought that this would probably be a good time, Jeremy, since we're talking about working remotely. Both of these solutions you can use remotely, but we know Acumatica was built in the cloud. So just as simple as possible, how is Acumatica any different?
Yeah, when we look at a product like Acumatica, some of the biggest differences is the platform that it was built for. I mean, Sage 100, one tried and true product, been around for a long time, kind of the battleship of the ERP world, just, very tried and true. But the platform is, for lack of better terms, a desktop, on-premise, client on your PC, right. And that architecture still very valid, but not the latest and greatest when it comes down to it. And I think what people look for in a solution as they look to migrate to something different is something that's possibly built for the cloud, and that's kind of a nebulous term per se, but probably the bigger question is, can I run it on my phone? Can I run it on a tablet? Can I run it on a browser? And the idea of running on any device anywhere in the world on any browser, as well as native applications built on Apple iPhone or iPad or Android tablets or phones, really takes that technology to a place that allows that, all of a sudden you're saying, I'm going to run the same application that I run on my desktop on my phone, and it's going to size appropriately. And I'm going to run it from the airplane when I'm in the air, and I'm going to run it on vacation, which people don't want to do, but unfortunately,
it's the world we live in. Yes, sir. That's right.
Yeah. So it's really kind of optimized for that access when it really comes down to it. It's a pretty simple statement that they make, which is, anytime from anywhere on any device. I mean, that is
easy.
That's what it comes down to.
So there's no need to call a solution provider. There's no need to worry about having a server or anything like that. They take care of all of the hosting side of it for you?
Yeah, and they actually have two different two different models. We're really three different models. Their product is what they call cloud portable, kind of a neat little catchphrase. But what it really comes down to is if you want to put it in their cloud and pay for their service, that's the simplistic way, or the simplest way to run it.
Get you going right away. Yep.
Yeah, and it becomes like Gmail, right? You don't really think where Gmail is housed. You don't know that if it's in Seattle or if it's in San Jose where Google's, but it's just Gmail. Gmail's out there somewhere. It's running. I don't think about where it's running. I don't really care. I
just want it in. Yeah,
just want to log in and get my access to my account. So they have that flavor. They have a flavor with it, what they call private cloud, which is you go to Amazon or you go to Google, more Amazon and Azure for the relationships that they have, but you're putting it on a server that is managed by Amazon, and you're putting in your own private hosted cloud environment that they help you optimize, but you're kind of maintaining that environment to allow access in and out.
Okay.
And then the third possibility is to load it on your server in-house on premise, because there's an overwhelming need to put it on a server that's four walls, whether that be security or whether that be, tied to an application that is maybe on premise that's never going to go cloud, and there's a reason to have it within your four walls. That's highly discouraged at this point. They're really,
well, that makes sense. If it's a cloud native product, right? That's the allure, is that you don't have to manage any of the. But you're right, in certain circumstances, and security is a big one. Totally fair. There may be a situation where that's desirable, but no, that's excellent. Is there anything else with Acumatica, Jeremy, you want to talk about before we move on?
I would say the one thing that we've battled over the years, and this is prior to my coming on board just a little bit less than a year ago, for the group, has been, what solution out there has the breadth of functionality that can meet someone that wants to go there, that may be in a product on premise today. And as the market has kind of continued to develop, and that product line of cloud products, which there's more than just Acumatica out there,
Mm-hmm.
How fast are they getting to the functionality, especially when it comes to inventory, purchase order, sales order, bill of materials, manufacturing. Those were the last ones to come online, and so we kind of have been watching that market for a number of years to say what product really fits our client base and our expertise, and Acumatica has kind of risen to that challenge, where some others haven't gotten there functionality wise to really meet that need, because there's a lot of history in older products that evolution and functionality really is robust, and when you start over or start something new, that robustness typically kind of decreases in functionality, increases in efficiency, but we really chose Acumatica excuse me, because of that robustness that they came out with inside of their product.
No, that's great. And if you have questions about Acumatica, Jeremy, should they reach out to you?
Sure, they can reach any one of us, but certainly if they're interested in Acumatica, learning more, I'll be who you end up with at the end of the day. But
okay, so we're in position to show some information. Excellent. That's
absolutely,
excellent. Yeah. Awesome. So the obvious stuff, pros and cons of working remotely. I think you said already, maybe one of the buried cons, and it's not a big deal. We live in a responsive world, is you're always connected, kind of is a simple way to say it. But from a standpoint of not necessarily efficiency, because obviously if you don't have to drive into a central location and do a task that you could accomplish from home or from a remote connection, this question is more of when I'm at home using my system remotely, Is it fast? Is it quick? Is there a noticeable speed difference than if I'm, say, sitting here at the office on my network here?
You're definitely going to see some degradation. I don't think there's any ifs, ands, or buts about that. You see a little bit of a delay, but not an overly big delay that would keep you from working efficiently. But there is a hesitancy a little bit, but I think that's been overblown. I think at this point, when you think about speed, I think you kind of have to think about it in two ways. One is the place that you're getting the remote session from, optimized to serve up those remote desktops, the RDP session. So that's your first layer. Is that PC going to be able to handle the number of users and the processing speed that needs to be up there? I'll give you an example. A buddy of mine here in Idaho works for Idaho Power, and when the pandemic hit, they went remote. Well, their current servers that they manage in-house, were kind of optimized for about 80 people to be on a remote session at any given time.
That's big,
because they're working remotely, right? And then pandemic hit, and all of a sudden they had 500 people that needed to be on that box. So speed went through the floor because they just weren't ready for that amount of people to be up on that session. So you got to think about that first layer. The second layer is the bandwidth that's coming out, the pipeline that's coming out, which is typically at a business, the pipeline is nice and big, right? So you're getting a big internet bandwidth, and it's going to serve you as fast as you can take it. Well, then the third layer is, where are you at home, and what are you connected to? Are you on a hotspot, which is the slowest thing possible, or are you on a cable modem, or are you on DSL? And what's your pipeline? So if your pipe's small and your business is big, it's going to taper down, and so you got to think of those three layers to make it the most effective. But if you have reasonable processor, reasonable bandwidth, and reasonable bandwidth on your side, the speed should be, essentially like you're sitting in your office without any big degradation.
We use a hosting provider, so quite often we find ourselves offsite, and I can speak, individually and say that I've never ran into an issue. Now, I don't necessarily use the Sage portion as intensely, but for all my other programs, when we say fast, like, it's a good point. It's relative, right? So no, that's extremely helpful. That's a good point, a good starting point that most folks may not even think about. But I've heard about printing, regardless of whether or not you've got a robust pipeline and all the above. What about printing? If somebody's going to do a lot of that offsite.
To kind of wrap up that topic on number one as well, when you think about a product like Acumatica, who's kind of built for that browser, I think you do inherently see some efficiency gain. Still so far, though it is drastically changed from even a couple years ago. The speed of entering something in a browser-based interface versus a desktop interface, that continues to get way better. But I guess I always use the analogy, we all have, many of us are on Office 365, and do you like running Outlook on your desktop, or do you like running Outlook on the browser? And most people a long time ago chose the desktop because of speed. If you revisit Outlook on the browser, you'll notice that the efficiency and the speed and performance has greatly been enhanced over the last couple of years. But there is still maybe a misconception of browser-based solutions aren't as fast, but they are, and I would say that's still the case. It's just the amount of speed is so minuscule now that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the pandemic likely expedited that whole scenario. So
yeah,
all good points.
So back to your question about printing.
Yeah, sorry to jump ahead. I get excited.
No, you're good. So I think when you think about printing's always been a challenge remotely. I mean, it's definitely been a big hurdle. There's a couple different ways to really optimize printing. But that is definitely a place where you see some degradation. You know, we're used to hitting print and for the most part instantaneously getting the printer to fire off. And when you're in an RDP session, it's got to create the image or the file. It's got to transport that file to your PC to push to your printer. So you see typically a 5-second delay between hitting print and seeing that printer light up.
Okay.
So you see, and that is, again, there's a lot of variables in there around bandwidth and processing speed and whatnot, but you'll see a delay there. There's just no doubt about it. We've worked with a couple different solutions, namely a product called TS Print, which really helps that performance get better. There's different scenarios that it really helps, especially when you're dealing with odd shaped documents like an 8.5 by 14, bigger document spans, and that helps. And you see more of an instantaneous print job coming through, cuts that 5 seconds down to 2.5 or 2. There's a cost behind it, but it's definitely a place you'll see some degradation. It continues to get better, but you just got to walk in eyes wide open. There's a cost to be paid a little bit for their remote activity.
As we're talking, I'm seeing a couple of things. First, if you're working remotely, you're likely, in some scenarios, you may be printing heavily and still mailing those invoices or documents or whatnot. But right there, you could use the paperless office feature, right? And that's Sage specific. But I guess there's more than just TS Print. There's some other ways that you could go about it, but it doesn't sound like it's a terribly long extension from what you're used to. So that doesn't really sound like something that would probably be as big of an issue as security. Jeremy, we live in a very active online world. We say this all the time. Customer experience, you want to get back to people as quickly as possible, but you don't want to sacrifice the security of your infrastructure just to be able to do that, right? So how about working remotely? Talk to us a little bit about security, if you would.
Yeah, and when I look at security, especially as we watch what's going on in the world, and there's a concern, especially today, at a heightened level.
Yeah.
When you look at security, a couple of questions come to mind. How secure are you? We've had a number of clients this year that have been hit by crypto locking and ransomware, and that can just take you down, instantaneously, and they're going to hold you ransom for, a couple of thousand Bitcoin or, whatever their currency that they're trying to get from you. We had a client a couple of years ago in the dairy industry that delivers milk, and they got crypto locked. They found out quickly that they didn't have a good backup, which is definitely key, and didn't have a good disaster recovery plan. They were using what is it called? The remote solution that takes backups and pushes them up. Carbonite.
Yeah, sure.
They were taking that level of security and backup disaster recovery on their own plate, and no one had ever tested it. And so they came to find out, after they got locked, they found that they didn't have a good backup of their server. So for close to 3 weeks, their entire system was locked down. Luckily, they had some ability. This was when I was with a previous company. We had some ability to kind of keep business rolling, but and penting up a lot of transactions. But it created a nightmare of a mess to administer. Backlog of keeping up and resetting the server up, and it ended up costing them $6,000 in crypto coin to get out of it. Where and that was after they negotiated down from $40,000. And so it really creates a nightmare. So at a minimum, what I would suggest in that environment is, or in that experience is, make sure you have a good backup, make sure you have a good disaster plan, and test that disaster plan.
Back to the backup. Yep.
The when you look at going to a hosted solution that's managed, whether that be Summit, go to my ERP, or doing it on your own inside of Amazon or Google, or using someone that is managing it for you, this is a place where that becomes one of the major things you're paying for.
Got it. Makes sense.
That Google's not going to allow someone to penetrate their wall, right? I mean, it's going to be, and they're going to have you so isolated inside of that wall that if for some reason someone does get to you, you most likely have an image off-site, and they can turn around and up another image and put you back to square, at a short amount of time, and maybe a day behind the curve. So that's one thing you're really paying for when you go to that environment. I think when you think about doing it yourself, are you keeping up with, and I know I close mine down a lot, which is, I have McAfee loaded and I never subscribe, so I get the notification.
Yeah.
Really want to move forward, because we have different solutions. I say yes, 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 and part of me is praying that we have a different solution, right? So
right.
But what security, depending on where you're at, if you're doing it yourself, you're as secure as you feel comfortable maintaining that level. When you move to a hosted platform, they've got a lot more at stake to lose for security, so they're going to put those measures in place. And probably the biggest key out of this thing is make sure you have a good, solid disaster recovery plan and test it. Test it at least one time a year if you can afford to do that, at a minimum.
And that's pretty much regardless of whether you're going to work remotely or not, right? Just do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
definitely
the best way you can help yourself. Yep.
Yeah, there's definitely a security becomes a little bit of a different play, or the sense of urgency, because you're dealing with people like me that are on a home network, and I may not be as secure in my home network as the business is, but I'm accessing the business. And so, whether that be putting VPNs in place so that it's tunneled, or, making sure that I'm only doing things through RDP on the terminal server, again, maybe through a VPN that really kind of makes that connection secure and clear. There's different measures. We're definitely at Matrix, not the technical body to really say what the best thing is. That's an IT group that would do that. But just playing our experience, you definitely want to make sure that you know what that plan is.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point. That's we are here to help with any of our clients with understanding, further answering any questions of necessarily pros, cons, security. We're giving you a lot of information here, and it's meant to be at a high level, so we do recognize that. But we would ask, if you have questions, please reach out to us. Again, the call is free. So, Jeremy, is there anything with security further that we should talk about?
No, I think you nailed it. And I think from our standpoint, we know a lot of people in the industry that deal with this level. So it's just a question of putting the right person in front of you at the right time. So we're here to help you kind of put those two connections together.
No, that makes total sense. And I appreciate, again, all the insights so far. I've got another area for you here, Jeremy, a couple more questions, and then we'll let you go. But can you tell us about some solutions that either work with Sage or Acumatica that add remote use functionality?
Yeah, there's a couple different areas, and I guess this whole section, there's more than what we'll talk about here today, but we want to highlight a couple different sections inside of this presentation. But when you think about certain groups in your organization that may need remote access, they may not need remote access to the level of giving them access to a desktop via
Right.
RDP. That might be a good way to do it. That's not saying that they're not, don't let rise to that level, but one group particularly that comes up a lot is, I have a salesperson in the field, and they're traveling around a region and they're visiting customers, and they need to remotely look at customer inquiry to gain, does that customer owe us money? Do they, have they placed an order recently? What's, just getting into information, or going to the level of, I'm on site and I'm going to put an order in the system for delivery, or maybe I have some stuff on my truck and I'm going to create an invoice and sell them something on the spot.
Okay.
So that's one group that comes up a lot, which is just, we have some remote sales force that need access to data. And there's a couple different solutions that come to mind when we think about that group. One is Sage CRM, which bolts on to Sage 100. It offers a level of information around the customer for CRM purposes, which stands for Customer Relationship Management, and lets them manage opportunities and activities and cases and orders and accounting information that gets fed over. But it's a browser-based solution, so they can access it from their phone or from any tablet, or it's meant for a browser, so it really gives that remote capability without having a remote session needing to be in place. Another solution that is out there, there's a couple different ones out there, and they definitely have different pros and cons, but it's a mobile sales solution that runs on an iPad or runs on a phone, Android or based operating system, but really gives a window to data on those devices and allows people to put in orders and put in invoices and do some inquiry. But they're built specifically for a remote device, a mobile device for a salesperson, and kind of speaks to their daily activities in that realm. ScanForce comes to mind, XK0 comes to mind. Those are two different providers with two different solutions. But again, the idea of that is Sage stays where it's at. There's no change to the office and the back office of what they're up to. You're kind of just giving access to that information within Sage on a mobile device for that group of people.
Yeah, and I'm thinking now I could have called this situations that require remote use functionality, because the second that we hear a lot is that everybody's dispersed, but we still need to get things done. So in this specific example, Jeremy, I'm asking you about purchase orders. Is there a way for the team to be apart but yet still be able to achieve the efficiency with their PO approval processes, submitting purchase orders, etc.?
Yeah, there's a couple solutions that come to mind around this one. One would be a document management solution that POs get created, or they get sent in and scanned, and that scan creates the PO, and that scan and PO create an approval process that's in a solution that's browser based, that again, the managers, people in the staff that don't have access to Sage, can approve via their phone or via their remote access through a browser to approve a PO, or go through a process, a workflow that gives them that ability. There are some what they call spend control solutions. eRequester comes to mind. Complete is another one out there that says we're going to give an interface, a browser-based interface or a phone-based interface for someone remotely to put in a requisition, and a requisition says, I'm looking to buy these items, and it goes through an approval process based on logic of your approval process, which would be, if it's under 20 bucks, it goes through, no questions asked. If it's more than 20, it goes to the manager. If it's more than 500, it goes to the executive. Maybe there's a chain of command that it needs to roll through, and that's all remote. And it compares that PO, based on that value of the PO on your budget within the system, are you starting to go over budget? And if you are, it goes to the president of the company. So there's a lot of different avenues. But the key for this presentation and the topic is you're giving that ability remotely to surgically deal with one problem, which is getting requisitions into the system. And if you have a lot of people remotely that are on job sites or at different buildings and they're putting in requests to buy things, but right now they're writing it down or filling out an Excel spreadsheet, emailing that, and someone in email does that approval. Someone's got to ultimately key that back into Sage if you're using PO processing within Sage. And solutions like this would just put that all to bed and make it integrated. Again, another solution that extends the remote capability, but is not changing the system in entirety, just kind of, enhancing the solution to be more remote access for that one need.
Yeah, and as far as like a paper trail, obviously that would all be electronic, so you could see whom did what and when, probably, right?
Yeah, time stamping and different alerts, different alerting mechanisms via email to those people, and we'll talk about workflow and alerts here in a second as well. But that gives that ability for communication, whether it be a text message to that executive that needs to go through that approval of that PO requisition. Different ways to communicate that information out now.
Yeah. Well, you can see where the obvious efficiencies are there for folks in the accounting department. But what about executives? Dave wants a report. I need to be able to get in and run Dave a report, but I don't need a full-blown license, for example. I don't need to be in Sage, that kind of thing. Are there executive reports needed daily that we could find a solution to help folks deliver those more efficiently?
Yeah, you mentioned one that's a pretty simple one, which is paperless office, giving that ability in paperless to out and putting them in the PDF format that are out on the network drive for someone to be able to access. That's the lowest level of and simplest way to make it happen, and that's included in
attach it to an email.
Just a matter of setting it up. Yeah. When you think about automating that process, there's a couple different ways within Crystal to automate distribution of reports. That's another kind of the next level up. I think when you look at an executive that says, I want to be able to open up a report, sales by region, and then drill into that report to find out who the reps in that region are selling the most, to then say, what are the top 5 items within that region that are selling? And you want to drill in and drill around and really turn the data on end. You look at different business intelligence tools, BI tools, whether that be something like Power BI from Microsoft or Sage Intelligence or different avenues to distribute reports that have a data warehouse behind them for that access to kind of drill in and drill around. Those are a couple of different ways. Alerts and workflows is another opportunity inside of the Sage world that's already there, which is, every night run a process, email this group this report, or access to this PDF, or access to this BI, and automate that to the executive, or send them an alert with a report to say, the aging of the company is greater than $200,000 when it reaches, when the over 90-day column gets over 200,000, the owner wants to be alerted to know that threshold has been met. Email them the aging report. That's something alerts and workflows can do inside of a conditional statement. So rather than receiving the report every day, there's sort of a condition to be met to receive that report.
To send it even, yeah.
Yeah, right. So they're not, you get a report every day, you kind of get numb, right? It's the same report all the
exactly. Yeah.
You're not opening it up, but you're kind of looking for that, my feeble mind is the easiest way I put it is, most of the time when you're printing a report, you're looking for the total, and then you're looking for some exception to a rule. You know, what's standing out in that report, and that's the highlighter that you break out and you highlight that and pass it on and say, this looks weird, right? You know, or
Yeah.
this is something, you know, someone's over their budget. Well, rather than doing that, let the conditional statement on the database find that highlighted portion and email you when it happens. So
that way you're not using up a resource. Yep.
Exactly. So it's a great tool
to
manage that process. So, you know, getting the right information out at the right time is easily done within Sage 100 and solutions like workflows. And you know, if someone really wants to get more and more granular, then you look at a BI tool to give that offsite, you know, browser-based remote solution to get that information, you know, and spin it on its head when it needs to be.
That makes complete sense. And thanks for answering all of my questions, because just like we said in the invite, that working remotely is nothing new, right? Everybody is facing challenges and trying to be more efficient. And that's really the premise of this episode, is to kind of drive home that if there's anything that you have further questions about, how do I do this remotely? How can I achieve, how can I do my job the way you guys are saying through that episode, Nate? Give me a call, give Jeremy a call. You see the number on the screen there, and our email addresses as well. Guys, that's what we're here for. And if there's some additional value that we feel, you know, we get a question that comes in later on, we want to share that with the audience as well too. So we really do encourage you to reach out, even if it's just a 5-minute, hey, real quick. Again, the call is free. So Jeremy, I appreciate you hanging with me again today. Really appreciate the insight. Extremely helpful. I think probably at this time, we can open up to questions if there are any. And of course, keep in mind the session was recorded, so check your email in a couple of days, and you can watch the replay again either there. You could go to our YouTube channel. Of course, if you visit us online, that's probably going to be the easiest way to watch it and then reach out all on one page. So, Jeremy, thanks again. Appreciate everything. Are there any questions that we've received?
I don't see anything in the chat, so I'll light up the mics and allow people to chime in when they need to. So I'm going to allow mics, and you just take yourself off mute and ask away, and we're here for you to answer those questions.
All right, we'll give that a couple minutes, and if you want to drop off, we appreciate you joining today, and look forward to talking with you in the future.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm gonna take from the pause and the silence that there's probably no questions. Is that fair?
Yeah, it means we answered everything perfectly.
You answered everything perfectly. Way to go. Well done again, Jeremy. All right. Well, again, thanks for tuning into episode 8. What are your options for working remotely? I'm Nate. Thank you again, Jeremy, for joining us today. Folks, if we can help you in any capacity with your Sage 100 solution, if you'd like to hear more about Acumatica, our newest addition to the lineup, reach out, give us a call. Again, doesn't cost anything to get the conversation started, and we're happy to help serve you. So everybody have a great day, take care, and thanks for joining.